There's farmland in China that's been planted and harvested for 4,000 years. The soil is still alive, not still okay, still productive. The American Midwest turned to dust in one lifetime. This soil never stopped. No collapse, no exhaustion, 4,000 years of harvests on the same ground. That's not a myth, that's documented history, and it's the method this video is built on. Now look at a raised bed behind a suburban house. The soil's gone grey like ash, like something that used to be alive. Water beads on the surface instead of soaking in. Tomato seedlings planted 3 weeks ago haven't grown an inch. Most gardeners do what the garden centers tell them. Haul in fresh topsoil, dump in synthetic fertilizer, hope for the best. The farmers who kept that Chinese soil alive for 4 millennia never had garden centers. They had something else. And researchers digging through the records found something wild. Dead soil usually isn't dead. It's dormant. Those farmers kept soil alive forever, using almost nothing but waste products your household throws away every day. Most gardeners never learn this. The gardening industry spent decades training you to find these things disgusting or throw them straight in the trash. Soil scientists studying biochar, a stable, carbon-rich material made by slow-burning organic matter with little oxygen, found that ancient farmers were engineering long-term soil fertility centuries before anyone had the word microbiome. University labs measured how this material holds nutrients and water in ways compost simply can't match. And it's not just biochar. Agricultural historians translated one of the oldest farming manuals in existence, a Chinese text from the 1st century BCE, attributed to an official named Fan Shengzhi. Buried in its instructions, soil fertility techniques modern agronomists are only now rediscovering. Farmers used these methods for generations. Universities measured why they work. Here's what's coming. 3 ancient techniques, each older than most modern countries. Each one can turn grey, lifeless dirt into soil that grows food without a single bag of synthetic fertilizer. But here's the twist. Most people who try these methods fail, not because the techniques don't work, because of one mistake that quietly cancels out almost everything else on this list. That mistake is happening in gardens everywhere, right now. Nobody's noticing. We won't reveal it yet. Technique 1, the night soil secret. What if the most powerful fertilizer in agricultural history was something almost every household flushes away without a second thought? The answer shocks most people the first time they hear it. For thousands of years, farmers across East Asia relied on a practice historians call night soil, the careful collection, agging, and application of human waste as fertilizer. Sounds crude. It wasn't. It was one of the most sophisticated nutrient recycling systems any civilization ever built. Here's why it worked. Human waste is loaded with nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, the same 3 nutrients printed on every bag of synthetic fertilizer sold today. But raw waste applied directly to soil is dangerous. It carries pathogens, burns roots with excess ammonia, and attracts disease. Farmers who relied on night soil for generations weren't reckless. They aged and composted it, sometimes for months, letting heat and time kill off harmful organisms while keeping the nutrients intact. Here's where people get it wrong today. Modern gardeners hear night soil and either write it off as an unsanitary relic or, far worse, try to shortcut the process by applying fresh waste directly to garden beds. Neither one gets it. The whole system depended on patience. Agging wasn't optional. It was the difference between fertilizer and hazard. The safe, modern version starts with proper composting, not the raw material itself. Layer carbon-rich material like dried leaves or straw with nitrogen-rich green waste. Keep it moist. Turn it regularly. That recreates the same core chemistry that made night soil work, minus the risk. The point was never the waste. It was closing the nutrient loop. Nothing left the farm. Everything consumed eventually came back to the soil that grew it. Within weeks of a compost system maturing, you'll see the shift: darker soil, looser, holding moisture without waterlogging. Same transformation ancient farmers were chasing. modern, sanitary version. Most gardening advice treats fertility as something you buy in a bag, not something you build through cycles of return. The ancient systems worked because nothing was ever truly wasted. Every household was its own nutrient factory, feeding its own fields. But recycling nutrients only solves half the problem. The other half is invisible, happening beneath the surface, inside the soil's structure itself. Technique 2, the black earth of the Amazon, rebuilt in China. There's soil found across the Amazon basin that's puzzled scientists for over a century. It's called terra preta, black earth. Unlike the thin, nutrient-poor soils typical of tropical rainforests, these patches are dark, fertile, and stable for over 1,000 years, with almost no maintenance. The secret wasn't a mineral, it was charcoal. Ancient farmers, working independently in South America and across parts of Asia, discovered that partially burning organic material in low-oxygen conditions produced a stable, porous carbon structure, now called biochar, that turned poor soil into some of the most enduringly fertile ground on the planet. Here's why it works, and it's not what most people assume. Biochar isn't a fertilizer. It doesn't feed plants the way compost or manure does. Its porous structure acts like a microscopic apartment complex for soil biology, a permanent home for beneficial bacteria and fungi, a sponge that holds water and nutrients that would otherwise wash away in the next heavy rain. Here's the mistake almost everyone makes. They add biochar straight out of the fire pit, expecting instant results. Raw, freshly made biochar is nutrient-hungry. Its pores are empty. It pulls nitrogen out of the surrounding soil before it gives anything back. Skip this step, and you'll see stunted growth weeks after application, and wrongly conclude the method doesn't work. The fix is called charging the biochar. Before it touches a garden bed, soak it, traditionally in aged manure tea, compost liquid, or diluted urine, for 1 to 2 weeks. This preloads the porous structure with nutrients and microbes. Once it's mixed into soil, it starts releasing fertility instead of stealing it. Once charged and worked into the top 6 to 8 inches of a bed, the transformation compounds over time. Unlike compost, which breaks down and needs replenishing every season, biochar is remarkably stable. Studies on ancient terra preta soils show the carbon structure can persist for centuries. One well-executed application can keep improving soil structure for years, sometimes decades. Here's what garden centers won't tell you. The biochar on their shelves is usually sold uncharged, dry and inert, inactive charcoal dust waiting for you to do the charging step at home. Skip it, and that expensive bag is nearly useless for the first full growing season. But even perfect soil structure means nothing if the same crops get pulled from the same ground, season after season, until the nutrients those plants need are exhausted. That's where the final piece comes in, a rotation strategy older than most written history. Technique 3, the ancient rotation formula. Long before the word nitrogen existed in any language, farmers across ancient China already knew, through generations of trial and error, that some plants left soil richer than they found it, while others exhausted it. They were watching legumes, beans, peas, related plants, do something science wouldn't explain until the 19th century, pull nitrogen straight from the air and fix it into the soil through bacteria living in their root nodules. Farming records dating back over 2,000 years, including Han Dynasty texts, describe rotation systems alternating legumes with grain crops like wheat and millet. Not guesswork. A refined, repeatable system, passed down and improved across generations of farmers who couldn't explain the chemistry but could see the results. Here's where the mistake happens today. Modern backyard gardeners, especially in small raised beds, grow the same high-demand crops, tomatoes, peppers, squash, in the same spot year after year, because that's where there's room, because it worked once before. Each season, those plants pull the same nutrients from the same patch of soil. Nothing gets put back. The fix: divide your growing space into cycles, not fixed spots. A bed that grew tomatoes or corn one season gets planted with beans, peas, or another nitrogen fixer the next, sometimes not even as a harvest crop, but as a cover crop grown purely to be cut down and worked back into the soil. The change isn't always visible in one season, which is exactly why so many gardeners quit before it pays off. But by the second or third rotation, the difference is unmistakable. Soil that once needed heavy fertilizer every spring starts needing less. Plant vigor increases without buying a single new product. Here's what most gardening advice leaves out. This ancient rotation principle is the entire foundation of today's expensive commercial soil building programs selling back a system farmers used for free over 2,000 years ago. But feeding the soil isn't enough on its own. The next piece changes something more fundamental about how these three techniques work together, and it's the part almost nobody puts together, even after learning all three. Night soil composting, charged biochar, and legume rotation. Even all three together are missing something that decides whether any of this actually takes hold or quietly fails within the first few weeks. Here's the thing almost nobody talks about. You can do the composting right, charge the biochar properly, rotate the legumes exactly as described, and still end up with soil that barely improves. That's not hypothetical, it happens constantly. The reason isn't the techniques themselves. It's the order they're applied in and a timing mistake that undoes a shocking amount of the work before it ever has a chance to matter. Most people find this out the hard way, usually one full growing season too late. Here's another detail worth sitting with. All three of these systems were used together in the same fields by the same farmers thousands of years before soil chemistry existed as a science. They weren't isolated tricks. They were pieces of one integrated system. The sequencing mattered as much as the ingredients. That's where the story gets genuinely interesting. Every day in kitchens all over the world, coffee grounds go into the trash. Eggshells go into the trash. Vegetable peels go into the trash. Every one of those small, ordinary discards is quietly leaving a house that could have used them to build something ancient farmers took generations to figure out. There's an irony here. The same households spending money every spring on soil amendment are, at the exact same time, throwing away the raw materials for that same amendment, for free, every single week. Picture a small family farm along the Yellow River, roughly 2,000 years ago. Nothing leaves the property that doesn't come back. Not the ash from the cooking fire, not the animal waste, not the stalks left after harvest. Every one of those things has a return trip built in, a place it goes back to, a job it still has left to do. That farm doesn't run on purchased inputs. It runs on a closed circle, repeating year after year, never needing a refill from outside. Now picture a modern backyard 3 feet from a kitchen window. The coffee maker runs every morning. The grounds go in a garbage bag. The bag goes to the curb. 20 feet away, a raised garden bed sits struggling, its owner standing in a garden center aisle, holding a $19.99 bag of amendment, trying to decide if it's worth the price. The discarded grounds and the purchased bag are, chemically, closer cousins than most people realize. 3 techniques, 3 different materials, 3 different timelines, some working in weeks, some over years. On the surface, night soil composting, charged biochar, and legume rotation look like 3 separate tricks from 3 separate corners of agricultural history. But they're not separate, they're the same idea expressed 3 different ways. Every one of these methods runs on a single principle: nothing leaves the system. What the soil gives up eventually comes back to it. What the plants consume eventually returns in some other form. Waste isn't waste here, it's just nutrition that hasn't found its way back yet. That's the piece modern gardening culture quietly severed. Growing food stopped being a closed loop and became a straight line: buy a bag, use it up, throw away what's left, buy another bag next season. Input, consumption, disposal, repeat, no return trip, no closing the circle. The ancient systems never worked that way because there was no other option. No garden center, no delivery truck bringing in fresh bagged nutrients. Whatever farm needed, it had to generate from within its own boundaries. That constraint, which looks like a hardship now, was the exact pressure that forced these systems to work. Scarcity built the ingenuity that abundance later let people forget. And this connects back to the timing mistake. Charged biochar does little good in a bed still full of unresolved compaction. Rotating in legumes without rebuilding the soil structure, they're rooting into limits how much nitrogen actually gets retained. Perfect composting, skipping the other two steps, still leaves a garden vulnerable to the same nutrient exhaustion that's been building for years. These techniques were never meant to be used one at a time, tried in isolation, judged, discarded if the first attempt didn't produce a miracle. They were meant to work as one sequence system, structure first, biology second, rotation third, each step preparing the ground for the next. That's the real secret underneath all of it, not a single ingredient, not a single trick. A philosophy: treat the garden as a loop that returns to itself, not a line that runs out. Somewhere right now, there's a raised bed with grey, lifeless soil, water beading on top instead of soaking in. A gardener standing over it, wondering if it's worth trying again this year, or if it's time to give up and pave it over. That soil isn't dead, it never was. It's the same soil farmers along the Yellow River worked for over 2,000 years, cycle after cycle, without a single bag of synthetic fertilizer. Same basic chemistry, same biology waiting underneath the surface for the right conditions. The only thing missing is the sequence: the coffee grounds going into a compost pile instead of a trash bag, the charcoal getting charged instead of dumped in raw, the legumes taking their turn instead of being left out. The next time a garden bed looks tired, grey, half given up on, it's worth remembering. The soil isn't asking for something new. It's asking for something old, something already sitting in the kitchen trash, the fireplace ash bucket, the seed packet rack at the hardware store, waiting to be put back together the way it was always meant to work. If any of this changed the way a garden bed gets looked at, if the coffee grounds going into the trash tomorrow morning feel a little different, that's really all this was meant to do. There's no product being sold here, no special formula in a bottle, just 3 old ideas, still sitting in the historical record, still working exactly the way they always did, waiting for someone to pick them back up. If one of these techniques was new, or if the timing mistake explains something that's been quietly sabotaging a garden for years, it might be worth passing along to someone else standing in that same aisle, staring at an overpriced bag, wondering if there's a better way. There always was. If this hidden wisdom showed you something new, subscribe and hit the bell. Every like and share puts this in front of someone who needs it. The next video reveals more. Stay tuned.